I'm back here in London making videos again. It seems like it's been a very long time since I last spoke to you guys, but it's only been a couple of weeks, I guess, with the travel back from LA to London, the time difference that goes with that, getting back into my work routine and just the routine of life. It seems like way longer than only 2 weeks. But as I said, I'm back here doing my thing, working with clients, doing what I love to do. And with that comes my work with weight loss exposure. And it's that time of the week where I write my article and then do this video for the article. This topic that I'm about to discuss was inspired by someone called, what is his name? Dylan Drews. I hope I pronounced your second name correctly. At the start of the week, I put on my Facebook page, Weight Loss Exposure's Facebook page, a question out there to all my followers about what it is they want me to discuss this week. Just getting a feel for what people are going through, what they might be struggling with, and essentially allowing me to help them with what's really relevant to them. And Dylan was one of the guys who responded, and he wrote overeating. So that is what I'm going to discuss in this week's video. That's all he wrote, overeating, nothing else in his comment. So I've taken that to mean just the general topic of overeating, rather than anything specific that either Dylan or anyone he might know could be going through. So I've come from the angle of my experience of over 10 years working with the clients that I have worked with, and what it is that they brought in the situation or the scenario of overeating, and how I've gone about addressing that and then moving forward from that. So let's get cracking. Essentially, I think that we all have the possibility to overeat. That might be an acute thing, and for some people it's more long-term, a chronic overeating pattern, which is more of a unhealthy, dysfunctional relationship with food. I'm pretty sure that most people have, if nothing more, an isolated incident, one here and there, where they might eat or eat in excess or binge on a particular type of food. And it's not really that I'm looking at today. It's more the chronic overeating and the health problems and the weight challenges and body challenges that will bring, that I really want to get into, because clearly there's a discrepancy there between making a conscious choice and being trapped, if you like, in a downward spiral of eating too much and then not feeling great about yourself, and then piling on the weight to only make you feel worse, and you eat again, and etc, etc. So that's the angle I'm coming from today. Overeating to me can be broken down into two main types, compulsive and impulsive. To me, compulsive is an involuntary thing, so there's no conscious thought behind what the end result is, which is overeating, whether it's in terms of volume of food or a given food. It very much just seems to happen. An example might be you go to have a biscuit, you open a packet of biscuits to have one biscuit, and you end up eating the whole packet. Now, that wasn't your intention. You never set out to do that. Nowhere in your mind did you tell yourself that, but that's what ended up happening. I call that compulsive overeating. And the biscuit example is just an example. You can probably think of many more, might even be experiencing other ones, more probably realistic ones. On the flip side of that is what I call impulsive eating or overeating. And as the title suggests, impulsive does mean that there is a conscious thought that takes place, but it is a snap thought nonetheless. But people do stop to think about what they're doing before they do it. So it's not something that just happens. Somewhere along the line, a person will make a statement in their mind that they want to go and do something, and then they go and do it. So with overeating, it might play out like this. You might be walking back from your day at work, walk past a bakery, see a cake in the window, and say to yourself, you know what, I really fancy that cake. And so you consciously tell yourself that that's what you're going to do. You're going to go in the shop, buy the cake, and either eat a slice or end up eating the whole thing. That is the reality for some people. But there was a clear distinction there that person would have made a choice to go and do that. So that, as you can probably see, as I hope you can, there is a distinction between compulsive and impulsive. And I can break that down even more. In my experience, compulsive overeating tends to be a physiological thing, so something that's going on within the body. Whereas, largely speaking, anyway, an impulsive overeating situation is, or generally is, a mental emotional trigger to what essentially is the same result. So the end result for both paths is that a person eats too much, whether it's in volume or of a given food or both. The end result is the same, but the route at which they get there might be one or the other, and which is also common, is that it might be a combination of the both. What I tend to see over the years is that it is pretty much always at least a physiological thing, if not then a mental emotional thing as well, but at the very least it's a physiological thing. And I want to go on to now explain what goes on with each avenue. So the physiological first. Again, I can break that down into two sections or two areas. The first comes with not regulating when you eat. So either going too long without food or missing meals altogether. That essentially sends blood sugar levels out of control. People tend to dip in blood sugar levels. So what then happens is the body wants to bring that sugar level back up. So this is where the compulsive side comes in. The brain will send a message to the individuals to eat anything that is sweet, usually sugary, that breaks down quickly and that goes into the bloodstream and raises blood sugar levels rapidly. Because at that point the body just wants to normalize things, and it usually then just picks the fastest and the simplest resort, which isn't at that point necessarily or usually the best result. So yeah, so someone will eat something sugary or sweet and brings the blood sugar level up, but then spikes it too high, and then you get a crash, and then you end up in a vicious cycle of highs and lows of blood sugar level. And I'm sure many of you can relate to that. So that is one avenue of a physiological trigger to overeating. The other is the mismanagement of the meals that you do have. So what I mean by that is the proportion of the nutrients of fats, carbohydrates and proteins aren't balanced to give the body what it needs. And this is just as common as the first one with the mismanagement of blood sugar level, but it's less known by people, so they might not be aware that it's even going on, and that's usually the case in my experience. So meal proportions will be wrong, and what happens is, again, you get to a point where the brain works autonomously and it keeps that message of I'm hungry. You're eating, but the message is still there, I'm hungry, and you don't feel satiated or full. And that's largely because the body isn't getting the nourishment it needs. People today tend to look at food as a means to suppressing hunger rather than nourishing the body, whereas the body only cares about getting the nourishment it needs to thrive and to function optimally. So until it gets that in a position where nutrients are mismanaged, until it gets that balance, people tend to not get that feeling of being full. The brain is bypassing that sensory feedback and telling the individual to keep eating in the hope that the nutrients that are necessary are then taken in, just sheerly by eating in volume. So I guess most people can relate to this. You know you've eaten a lot, but you still feel hungry, and you might even eat till you're physically bloated, and you know everything's telling that you should stop, but you just almost as if you actually can't. So that's the second physiological trigger to overeating. And as I said, physiological in pretty much every scenario tends to be prominent with the people I see. And a distinction to make here, although the selection of food or when to eat in the first case of not eating at regular times or missing meals altogether is very much a conscious thing. It's a voluntary choice by that person. As I've just said, when that gets to a certain point, it then triggers an involuntary autonomous response, which is in the case of the first one, the body craving sugar and the brain sending out that signal just to eat anything. In the second one with the mismanagement of nutrients, it is just to keep eating until, or in the hope that the body will then get the nutrient requirement it needs just by sheer volume of food. So it starts off as a as a voluntary thing, even though it may not be consciously clear to people that that's what's going to happen, but then it definitely ends in an involuntary, compulsive overeating process, which is what I spoke about earlier. The second, as I said, is the impulsive and the mental emotional connection with that. I am in no way saying that I'm a psychologist or psychiatrist, so I'm not coming at it from that point of view. Clearly that's not my forte, so I can only speak about it from a point of experience and working with clients and telling you what tends to come up over the 10 years plus that I've been doing this. And you know, it is prominent to some degree, maybe not as strong as the physiological in most, but it can be a tricky thing. And I guess the bottom line with the mental emotional triggers is it needs to be established how deep rooted they are. If it is a relatively straightforward cause and effect, for example, someone might be working at a job that they hate under a huge workload, and they end up feeling pretty crappy about themselves at the end of each day, and as a pick-me-up they go and get their favourite coffee or dessert or whatever else they might eat in excess or drink in excess to counter the stress that they're under. Then there's a clear cause and effects, and that can be worked with relatively easy in terms of looking at what the cause is. In reality, to overcome that, decisions need to be made, whether it's a change of circumstances or at least implementing some strategies to cope with the stress of that environment in other ways than over consuming or eating foods and or drinks, is largely down to what the individual in question is prepared to do. The greater challenge comes with the deeper rooted mental and emotional triggers, which might surround food in itself and or might be so deep rooted that although people are aware that they're eating because of some emotional trauma, they might not even know what that is. It might be so deep rooted and so stretched out over time that they might have lost that connection with cause and effect, and that is not uncommon. In my 10 years, I haven't had that too much myself, but you know, I live and breathe this industry, so I know other people and I know other trainers and professionals that have had clients that are in this category. And for me, that's where it gets to a point where it might be better to seek professionals who can help you in that regard to really get to the bottom and unearth what it is that could be a trigger to your mental and emotional eating. At the very least, people should always be introspective when it comes to any overeating from this angle, to really see what they can shed light on themselves, really look within them, take the time and energy necessary to do that, and see what comes up. So that is the second trigger of overeating, the mental and emotional side, the more impulsive nature of overeating, usually there to suppress the emotion or the stress, a combination of both that people are going through, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, is very much an individual thing, and will then obviously dictate what course of action needs to be taken. The great news is, in my whole career, I've never really had a client that hasn't had some kind of broken relationship with food. Clearly, if clients didn't have a broken relationship with food, then for the large part they wouldn't need to see me. So if you're watching this video and you are in a position of where you are overeating, and if you can identify whether it's physiological or mental emotional or a combination of both, I want to say that you're not alone. So it's nothing to be alarmed by. The first point in anything that I do with my clients is to raise awareness. So it's great that you might now identify things that are going on in your life. From that, I tend to always start with the physiological triggers to overeating or a broken relationship with food, purely because that is my area of expertise, and it is something that can be implemented pretty much straight away. So when I first meet clients, I can already start to give them advice and tools by which they can modify their eating habits to affect and hopefully in the long term negate these physiological triggers to overeating. And the most important point, which is why I go down this route of the physiological aspect and addressing that with clients, is because it is one that gives profound results to the point where the mental and emotional triggers that might also be there are positively affected as a result from the physiological changes. I've never been in a situation with a client that's had to both influences, so the physiological and the mental emotional triggers, and not had those mental emotional triggers at least regress to some degree by simply focusing on the physiological aspects and implementing physiological changes to the way that they do things. I've never been in that situation. So to me, that is the best of both worlds. You can focus on the physiological triggers and implement things with diet and lifestyle that can limit or completely eradicate those physiological triggers. And then what tends to happen is that automatically has a knock-on effect to any mental and emotional triggers of overeating that people might also be struggling with. And that is essentially the path I take. I think that the overriding message here, other than clearly identifying where you might fit along this spectrum, is to really ask yourself the one question that really will determine your success in tackling these obstacles or any other obstacles that you might be facing with your health and weight management, and that is, what is your motivating factor for change? The more you can get on the deeper level of answering that question, the more likely you are to succeed with any strategy that you implement. And this is certainly no different. That's pretty much what I'm going to talk about today. I think I've covered a lot in this video. I don't want to talk too much longer. What I will say is that if you're watching this video and you think that you have some common situations that I've spoken about, that you're experiencing some of what I've spoken about, especially the physiological triggers to overeating, and you're wondering, well, you know, David's spoken about what those might be, but how do I address those? My book, The Weight Loss Blueprint, goes into great detail about managing blood sugar levels, how to do it. Also, it goes into great detail about ratios of fats, proteins and carbohydrates, how to know what's right for you, how to work around those, and ultimately how to optimize both of those so you get the most from your food, and invariably then don't suffer from the end result of mismanagement, which is overeating. My book, I'll put a link to the relevant page on my website for you to read more about what my book has to offer, get free chapters of the book if you so wish, and then of course buy the book. That comes with a 60-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk to you whatsoever. So you can even buy that, have a read, and see just how much the book has to offer you from the point of overeating, but from many other aspects as well that I believe are essential to your weight management and your health. Yeah, that's it from me this week. The article to this video will be down below in the info box, and a link to my book, The Weight Loss Blueprint. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you all soon.